I'm Dane Rose, and for those of you joining me in this year of rapid growth and well-being, I want to welcome you to week number 19 and to a topic that can have a profound impact on your life as it has in mine. In fact, this topic, again, using week number one's focus on the 80-20 principle, this is one of those 80-20 topics where if you do this well, you're going to get to wherever it is you want to go, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially, sexually, 10 times faster than if you do not respect the power of this opportunity, this field of possibility. And it is simply picking heroes, teachers, heroines, mentors to catapult your momentum in the awareness that a teacher can accelerate wherever it is you're going by an average factor of 10. And in some cases, it's 30. And 10x growth, 10x acceleration is a gold mine. You know, for people in science or in business, if you can get a 10x return on investment, you are at the peak of your field. You're the Warren Buffett of your day. It's a big deal. And while it may not seem in the chauvinism of our culture, the male chauvinism that says, you know, a 10x return on money, well, that's a huge deal. A 10x return on your goals, whatever. A 10x return on the value of your relationship, oh, big deal. You know, it's a strange phenomena when the symbol of value, bits of paper, are treated with more respect than real value, growth, learning, quality of relating, etc. But be that as it may, let's explore how and why you can accelerate 10 times. Now, it's very, very basic. If you put together a team in which you need to combine X area of expertise plus X area of expertise plus X area of expertise, if you need to combine these, let's say you want to be a Renaissance woman. You want to go out and study X for 20 years, then study X for 20 years, and then study X for 20 years. You're already outdated because most of these fields, which are coming under the exponential sway of technology, are not going to be in the same place you left them. So, I mean, you can't be fully engrossed in this expertise and this expertise and this expertise at the same time. So you do this for 20 years, maybe let's say you get to the top of your field, and you pause, do this for 20 years, get to the top of your field, then pause, do this 20 years, get to the top of your field. You are no longer at the top of your field. And here in your 60 to 80 years old, you don't have time. But let's say you have this same goal, combining an expert who has 20 years of experience in X with an expert who has already 20 years of experience with X and someone else who already has 20 years of experience with X. You can, with the right negotiation and positioning, be at the pivot point in a matter of a few phone calls of 60 cumulative years of the exact expertise you need to make an effective decision about what to do. This is where Henry Ford came in for me. When I left high school at age 14 for the last time, I've been doing little homeschooling experiments, trying to get better than school, realizing, left out something there, went back to school. No, I'm sure I can, what if I tweak this and this? I wanted to beat the education system by studying more useful topics, learning them more effectively, and making money rather than spending money. That was kind of my goal, and freeing up more time. High school is an absolute nightmare in time wastage. It's like, learn this about the 18th century, learn this about this weird aspect of mathematics, learn this here, learn this there, then do a bunch of homework on this that no one is going to read. That's the waste. We could be teaching our young people to actually solve this problems. When I left school for the last time, the way I learned creative writing, just to give an example of what's possible along these lines, is I decided, first of all, that one of the reasons I was not motivated to please my English teacher is that I was making both of us miserable. Meaning, if I wrote a very long and thorough paper, she had to stay up later that night than normal, doing something she didn't want to do, which was read a paper that has absolutely no value other than that it's going to get an A, a B, or a C. It's not helping anyone. And this is not motivating. I've got to get this paper done. I've got to get this paper done. Why? So that I can irritate my English teacher and make her stay up even longer reading my footnotes and this and that and the other. It's like, who wants to put her through that amount of suffering? So what I did was, I said what really matters to me. And I picked 5 topics. And we're getting to Henry Ford in a moment and how he helped with this. I picked 5 topics that I thought were really important to me, to my values, to the planet. And I decided I am going to write a brilliant article about each one. And I edited each of these articles at least 8 times. I read books on article writing, on editing, eliminate all the excess words, something you see I'm not doing today. But I wanted to master editing. And so I completed these articles, and then I submitted them to my favorite magazine. I was living in Vancouver, Canada at the time. And not only were they published, but the editor said, you're the only person who I don't have to edit their articles. And I'm 14 years old. And one of my articles was featured on the cover. And I said, okay, that's worth working for. To get important ideas out there, I will work my ass off. To irritate my English teacher, I will not work my ass off. Meaning I'm not going to slack to irritate her. I'm not going to create phenomenally great, long, interesting bits of writing that she's going to have to stay up marking. She's got to get through 30 of those. You think she's enjoying that kind of cramming? It's like sticking chocolate cake. The first one's nice, but 30 pieces later, it's disgusting for anyone. Who comes up with these crappy protocols that waste everyone's time? It's a nightmare. So that's how I studied English, was doing these articles. And I figured if an editor of my favorite magazine tells me I'm the best submitter amongst adults, I'm the only teen submitter there, I'm going to give myself an A, because I've achieved what I want to be able to achieve. I want to be able to write competently enough to get my points across so that they're received in an intelligent audience. If all 5 of my articles are gratefully received in the place I first submit them, that's good enough for me for a 14-year-old English lesson. Again, I'm not setting out to be a world-class author or anything like that. I just think it's an important skill. So this is an example of kind of pivoting school, but here's one of the ways I got there, and it's Henry Ford. One of the things that occurred to me in my early teens was that if I wanted to be a highly successful person, I should read biographies, not of all the mediocre adults around me, but I should read biographies of adults who have achieved exceptional results. So where do you go? Well, I went to the library, went to the biography section. Okay, Henry Ford, he started the Ford Motor Company. Let's start with him. Now, it turned out Henry Ford was called an ignoramus in one of the newspapers of his day. He sued them for libel. And they said, you are an ignoramus. You have a 6th grade education. You don't know the answer to this. You don't know the answer to that. You don't know. You are an ignoramus. You can't sue us for libel. And here's Henry Ford's reply. He said, I have an intercom right here. If I press this button, the leading metal specialist of the day picks up and tells me exactly what I want to know. I have a button here on my intercom. If I push this button, the leading attorney of the day comes in and tells me what I want to know. I have a sales specialist right here that's one of the top in the country, and if I press this button here, he comes in. I have a currency specialist over here. If I press this button, I have 12 buttons that will bring me hundreds of years of specialized expertise when I need to know it. He said, what do I want to do wasting my precious attention, which is focused on building this car company, on useless facts, filling my mind with useless facts that distract me from what I need to be doing? And he won the libel suit. But he also taught a young boy reading his biography that he was onto something. And so when I started my company, the typical thing that people were supposed to do going into landscaping and horticulture is go to a horticultural college and spend 4 years learning the Latin names of 4,500 plants, learning what pests ate each plant, learning which chemicals would kill the pests eating each plant, learning whether this plant was deciduous or evergreen, learning everything possible about 4,500 plants. And if you went to this 4-year college, you could then say you had a horticultural degree. There was just one problem with this way of studying. So let's set aside the fact that this is taking an enormous amount of time. Let's set aside the fact that I'm not helping a single client during that time. Let's set aside the fact that I'm going to pay this college to take me out of circulation for 4 years. The real problem was that none of my clients were complaining that landscapers didn't know the Latin names of plants. They were complaining, because I started out doing maintenance, they were complaining about 3 things that had nothing to do with 4,500 Latin names of plants, had nothing to do with whether it was earwigs or white aphids eating the leaves. It had to do with 3 unrelated topics. One was price. Either it cost too much or the price increased as the project went along. Client asked, how much is this going to cost? Landscaper says $3,600, give or take a little. Then they're into the project, $1,500. The landscaper's digging along in the soil. They hit a big tree root. And they say, oh, this doesn't look good. Why doesn't it look good? Well, this tree root's going to do this and this and this and this. Well, what do we have to do? We have to get this giant tree root out of this. Okay, get it out. Well, that's going to cost you. That's going to be another $2,500. Wait a minute, I don't have the money for that. This is pissing clients off, as you can imagine. A few weeks later, it comes along, your soil is worse than I thought. Well, okay, what do we have to do? Well, we have to bring in extra compost and rototill. Okay, do it. Well, that's going to cost you an extra $900. On top of that tree, it's like, and they were pissed about that. The next thing they were pissed about, when's my project going to be done? Oh, we'll have it done for you next week, ma'am. They don't even start until, they get their check, and they don't start until a week later. Well, okay. Obviously, they're not going to be done before they started, and they have all kinds of reasons for that. Then, as they get going, oh, so-and-so had a, car trouble, so it's another week late. So-and-so, these employees, they just disappeared. They got a better job, someone else, another week late. The thing is coming in 300% late with all manner of lame excuses. And this was pissing clients off. And finally, the client calls the person and says, I want to talk to you about this, and they don't return their phone call. Or there's a problem with my water, can you come out and fix it? Oh, they wouldn't return the call. Or they'd say, okay, we'll be out tomorrow, and again, going into procrastination. These three things, timing, price, communication, and sometimes doing what they said they were doing. I picked this tile and this photo, you've done this. Tell me what I'm missing here. If I take a photo of this and we compare these two, the colors don't match up. Well, of course the colors don't match up. This is natural slate stone. The batch that was here was this batch, and the batch that was here is this batch. Well, what does that mean? What it means is you don't get the color you thought you were going to get. Well, why didn't you tell me that before? Well, I just thought you're the customer. You know absolutely nothing. I thought you would know. These are the things that piss them off. You notice Latin names of lavender haven't come up in any of these things. So I'm hearing clients complain endlessly about these three things. So what's the problem with going off to a 4-year college learning the Latin names of plants? The problem is they're not teaching me a single thing about price, scheduling and management, or good communication. They are not teaching me the three things my clients are pissed about. If you know anything about brain psychology, you know the brain focuses on the negative. What does that mean? It means that if you do 5 things right and 1 thing wrong, the client is not going to be focused on the 5 things right. They're not going to look at a nice mown lawn in which 95% of it is green and 5% is brown. And they're not going to say, let's just ignore that brown patch of lawn because you got 95% of it right. No, they go straight to the 5%. Why is this brown? The brain focuses on the negative. If I know the Latin name of 4,500 plants, if I can rattle them off more beautifully than anyone else has ever rattled them off, but things cost more than the client expected, are late, and they're irritated with my communication, do you think I'm going to get a glowing review saying he rattled off the Latin names of plants nicer than anyone else ever rattled them off? No. They're going to say, it costs more than I said he would. it was late. He had lame excuses for late, and he didn't return his phone calls. That's what the review is going to say. So, in essence, just like with high school, the problem was not that there's no value in knowing the 4,500 names of Latin plants. No, that's a great situation. You can, that's useful knowledge. It's just not as useful as this stuff. Now, Brian Tracy, Strategies of Effective Selling, one of my mentors, talked about exactly how to deal with these things, how to relate to a customer, how to negotiate in a way that the price wouldn't go up, how to get things done, how to prepare, how to undersell the project and over-deliver. So while my peers were off learning horticultural expertise on Latin names of plants, this and that and the other, I was studying sales, project management, and effective communication. Something that, for example, the creative writing thing came in handy. And I was studying business leadership, referencing Ford. So then the crisis comes in. Well, you're a landscaper. You're not a sales specialist. So how are you going to manage that bit? Ford's intercom. I negotiated a deal with a nursery owner who had more University of Washington degrees, and that's a hot, that Washington State is an agricultural hotspot in the country, apples, this and that. They do a good job in horticultural studies at the University of Washington. He had multiple degrees. He owned a nursery. He knew where everything was. He knew what all the names were. He knew what the problems were locally. He had all of the information that would take me 20 years to learn. I didn't have 20 years. If I had spent 20 years, I wouldn't have learned what mattered to my customer. So I said, Bill, how much will you charge me to give me horticultural advice? I will buy the plants from your nursery. He said, oh, you don't have to charge me. I said, no, Bill. I want to pay you, and I want you to know what I'm paying for. I want you to pick up your cell phone anytime I call. I want you to prioritize this so that I can be in a client meeting and have them say, well, have you heard of lavender spatulae? That's one of my friends recommended that, and I was like, no, but I know who has. Get out my phone, call Bill. Bill, I've got a client out here. This is the situation. Wants to know if lavender spatulae is a good plant for the place. He's going to rattle off, this was before Google, he's going to rattle off what I need to know. He's going to say, well, it's been out of stock in nurseries around here for 3 months. But when we can get it in stock, it is very good for this and this, but this is its downside. It grows this big, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, thank you, Bill. Here's what you need to know, client, about lavender spatulae. What next? I said, Bill, I want to be able to do that. And so I'm going to pay you anything. I'm going to give you a bonus. I'm going to do you this. And how's that for you? You take good care of your mentors. Now, he saved me 20 years. And you think my clients were unhappy that I called the most knowledgeable expert in the entire region? No. And what they got from me was good communication, good timing. Well, last year, I think 89% of my jobs were done early. They never pay a dime more than the agreed price. Why? I'm my own insurance agent. I know there's unknowns and this and that and the other. I factor it in. They get what they want. I get what I want. Happy customers and more business than I know what to do with. So this is the power of mentorship. It's not just bringing in someone with way more expertise than you can possibly get. That is in and of itself valuable. It's the fact that when you free up 20 years it would take you to learn all that and instead do something. See, he wasn't a great communicator. He didn't need to be. I was. He was not always on time. I was. He didn't need to be. He didn't need to know exactly what the price was. He would say, oh, this, could be that. I'd say, okay, he's not always on the price. I'll just mark it up 30%. That way, if he's off, it'll cover it. And my client gets exactly what they're expecting for the agreed price. So this is the power of using mentorship to accelerate an arena significantly and create value for the only person who matters, your client. Whether that's your boss, whether that's your wife, or whether that's the person who signed the contract, your client is the person you have to make happy. And you need to know what he or she wants. You need to know what matters. Well, how are you going to know that? You ask in a questionnaire. So Ford taught me about the value of synergy. Now, I built on that. I created mentorships with a leading septic system designer who set some of the national codes for the country on waste treatment. I partnered with a very qualified, responsive, heavy equipment firm who could do stuff until I learned. I realized it was so annoying to wait for someone else that I finally learned how to operate heavy equipment myself. Because that's not something that can happen with a phone call. I might have to wait 3 days or this, that. So I mastered that. Couldn't delegate it. Because even if I'd had hired the best equipment operator, I still have to stand there with my design eye and say, no, go up another 8 inches on there. Cut that line here. So by learning heavy equipment and by learning about septic system design, you realize that it took me less time to learn how to operate massive pieces of heavy equipment effectively, how to landscape over septic systems, how to integrate with the construction process. I learned all of that in less time than it took my compatriots to learn the names of 4,500 plants. And I didn't have to spend a dime because I learned it while being paid to help people out. So this is the value of mentorhood. So Henry Ford, the value of having a team of specialized knowledge so that you don't have to have that specialized knowledge. Elon Musk, the importance of doing important things that are likely to fail. See, Elon Musk is my mentor for my most important project at this time, which is a free app that has a 5% chance, maybe let's say 10%, 5%, 10%, something in there, of touching 1 million people's lives. Meaning it is almost certain to fail at that goal. But if it succeeds, I will have touched 1 million lives for the better, which is the goal of my nonprofit, Happiness Data. So I'm doing things because I think they need to be done, not because I think they will succeed. Not because I think there's much of a likelihood of them succeeding. And so my plan is very much framed with Musk's viewpoint in that area. Now, we come into the terrain of parents. And parents invariably cause us enormous amounts of pain. Why? No parent is perfect. And the imperfections of our parents grate upon us uniquely more than they grate upon anyone else. Because there was a moment in every one of our lives when our life socially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically hung in the balance. And when the cock-up flaw in our parents nearly killed us. Because that's what happens when imperfect people have a 2-year-old in their hands and no parenting skills. Where are they going to get the parenting skills? They haven't learned any in school. This is a country that just thinks it's the most complicated thing you can possibly do is just supposed to happen. So these are not trauma literate parents, emotionally literate parents, spiritually literate parents. These are imperfect people raised by this culture. And they've got your life in their hands. So while you can look all around you and there's idiotic mistakes going on endlessly, this and that, none of them traumatize you the way your parents' idiotic mistakes is. Because when they left you in the car thinking it was no big deal with the windows up, and then got enamored because someone hot was flirting with them and da-da-da, and they were having an affair and blah, 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 you almost died. When someone else, when you're an adult and you do that, you just roll down the window and say, come on, get on with it. And it's no big deal. This means that parents can teach in the negative primarily. So I learned from my mother how painful it was to be on the receiving end of a lie. So I've never lied to a friend. I've never lied to a partner. I learned from my father how absolutely frustrating it is to have someone obviously make all kinds of mistakes and not be able to admit a single one. This is how, a good example of my father. He died recently, and we were not squared away because it's very hard to square away with someone who is committed to a lie. It's very hard to square away with someone who is committed to a lie because it makes them feel better than accepting the truth of their impact. It's very hard to square that up. And if there's unresolved trauma, meaning they nearly killed you several times, and they want to reframe that as how thoughtful they were being or whatever it is, this is going to create dissonance. So he lied at his deathbed. I kind of reiterated, look, you've got three of your 5 children who go through periodic phases of nearly killing themselves. There's nothing wrong with their bodies. These are successful people. That's a high statistic of suicidal impulses. And it's no mystery. We all watched it. We were there with you. I don't know what reality you saw, but you did this, and it really, really hurt. And the fact that you're so committed to denying it all drives some of us half crazy. So this is your chance, Dad. You don't have anything to defend. It doesn't help. His great comeback. I've loved you unconditionally since the day you were born. Normal love isn't enough for someone in this mindset. Unconditional love, the superhuman love, the love that no human is capable of. If you've ever thought about the absurdities linked to unconditional love, for example, that to love someone unconditionally means that you also love Hitler unconditionally. No. I love you unconditionally. Meaning you love me on condition that I'm not Hitler. Well, you're not Hitler. But if I was, you wouldn't love me. Yes, but you're not. But that's a pretty big condition. So you're loving me on condition that I'm like this and not like this. That's a condition. That's not unconditional. You love me on condition that I do what I do, but don't do what you can't stand. Well, that's a big condition. And you love me when you're in a good mood and say unconditional love, but when you're in a bad mood, you hate me. Well, that's a big condition. So why can't we just call it periodic love of a nature that is familiar to you and may not feel loving to anyone else? Why don't we call it that? No. Unconditional love. And so you can learn from a parent how not to be. I learned how maddening this was. So, of course, I'm trying to be sane and to allow other people to be sane. The way I do that is apologizing. I wasn't very nice there. I know it, and I'm sorry. Meaning, my father made everyone go on a wild goose chase for weeks before he would come out of these, bizarre reasons to insult you in a backhanded way. Like, he'd slap you in the face, run you around pretending it didn't happen, this, that, and the other, and then finally he would say, okay, I'm sorry that you are such a loser, because that's got to be difficult. So this would be his final, slap in the face. And so I learned that drives people nuts when you need a father's love. So I do the opposite. I regularly tell my partner, gee, I'm sorry I did that. And she says, no, that was nothing. I said, no, it was something. I could have done this. Instead, I did this. If I'd done this, you would have felt pleased and happy. As I did, you felt disappointed. I saw it in your face. So I'm sorry I did it. And this brings closeness, not insanity. In other words, you can learn how not to be someone that absolutely aggravates you by your parents. Gates taught me about constructive pessimism. You hear all the time, be positive, be positive, be positive. Gates is in the category of constructive pessimists. And in a scientific study that analyzed this, constructive pessimists achieve more than any other category, followed closely with constructive optimists. A constructive pessimist is someone who says, I'm sure someone's going to take us over in a hostile takeover if they get the chance. Let's see, who would it be? Okay, this company could take us over, this company, and this company. Okay, it's probably going to happen. What are we going to do? Let's get some cash in the bank. Number one, Gates has $30 billion in Microsoft. Let's make it less profitable for this category here. Let's form an alliance that if someone does try to take us over here, we'll do this. That's called constructive pessimism. What's the worst that can happen? Probably will. Let's work like hell to see that it doesn't happen. This performer outperforms any of the other type, followed closely by a constructive positive person. That's a person that says things are going to go well, so I'm going to work really hard because it's worth it, and it's all going to work out. And I'm going to work my ass off to see that it does. Now, Rockefeller Sr., Standard Oil, taught me two things. He taught me about micromanaging. Rockefeller famously went around the cans. I don't know if you can hear it. I can. We've got a nice rainstorm. Rockefeller went around the cans of his canning factories, and he would ask the solder people. They were hand soldering the tins of oil. How many beads of lead do you have in that rim? And they'd say 32 beads, sir. And he'd say, have we tried it with 28? They'd say, no, sir. Guidelines suggest 32. He says, I want to try it with 28. He'd do it with 28. He'd get a report, leaking oil. And he'd say, okay, we're going to settle for 30. And he'd save 2 drops of lead, by the thousands. And this is how, this manic obsession about saving and this and that. There's another great story I remember. Again, I remember these stories from 14 years old. Rockefeller's at the insurance agent's house. And he's at the office, and there's this raging storm, and he doesn't know. Any minute he may hear that his boat has sunk because it's not rated for this kind of storm. And what he can't debate on is whether to get the insurance policy. Because if he loses the whole boat and cargo, he will be furious. But if it's okay and he spends, 10% of the whole thing to insure it, that's, $100,000, millions of dollars in today's, oh my gosh, this is and Rockefeller gets so sick from this, just endless nibbling and clawing to get every last penny. It doesn't matter, he's the richest person around. What about this? What about that? Why did that taxi take this street? So you learn a couple of things from this. One, you learn that having a ton of money, if you're driven with obsessive greed, is a waste of time. It doesn't bring happiness at all. It makes you sick. Two, if you're that obsessed with every little penny, the more money you have, the more pennies you can lose. So you're going to be obsessed all the time. But finally, the way Rockefeller got his health back was by starting a foundation and giving his money away. This was his cure, which is a clue into disease and remedy. Disease is to be way unbalanced this way. The remedy is always to balance and do the opposite of what got you sick. This is a useful insight. And finally, his happiest moments of his life were giving away his fortune. Bill Gates has said the same thing with Melinda. And so you learn that in essence, if it's fun to make money, it's going to be even more fun to give it away. So these are a few of the ways that mentors have touched my life. Now, Hitler didn't touch my life, but I did want to mention the caveats of mentorship, because they're very, very important. We are a very simple culture. We like simple ideas. What's the one thing that would you'd attribute to your fortune, Mr. Gates, Mr. Rock? What's the one thing that a young person should do? And of course, there isn't one thing. There's 200 things that all add up. There's 1,000 different things, and they synergize. But, in a simple culture, we like simple thoughts. And so one of the things that we do, dangerously so, is we put our heroes, our heroines, our mentors on pedestals and box them in. Because they did this well, they did everything else well. Let's just mirror and copy the mentor. This is as dangerous as not having any mentors at all, because you may get 10x acceleration going in the wrong direction for you. So, for example, Henry Ford was my mentor when it came to having people on call with all the areas of expertise that I needed. He was not my mentor in terms of his anti-Semitism. Musk, my mentor in terms of knowing what's important, not my mentor in terms of his workaholism. 100-hour weeks, I'm doing the exact opposite. Parenting, my negative mentors for this and this and this, not to do this, but also in a few areas, my positive mentors. My father was an excellent communicator. My mother was an excellent chef. I'm an excellent communicator. I'm an excellent chef. But I don't tell lies, and so that's, positive, negative of parents. Gates, an insight in the value of constructive pessimism. You also read in the early biographies of Microsoft that he half killed a number of the early employees with shame and competition and this driven, frenetic attitude with people who didn't have his constitution. I've worked for several of his early Microsoft employees in my contracting business, and they're rich, but some of them are half dead, so, and there's a plus and a minus. Rockefeller, again, learning about efficiency. I've also done that, in terms of testing out different methods of construction, which is, nature is much more forgiving than home construction. So out in the garden, you know, what if this happens? Like what if you plant plants that are really tough for this area of the garden and that don't require soil amending? And the plants cost the same amount as the plants that do require soil amending. So that means a client could save $8,000 by not amending this whole stretch of their large land, but could still have healthy plants if I pick the plants right. Well, you know, that's Rockefeller trying to be systematic about saving money, not wasting it. And then distinction between strength and the goal and value. This is why I mentioned Hitler as just an example. Hitler was a phenomenal person in the talents of self-discipline, charisma, integrity. How many people in politics write a book like Mein Kampf and then do it? You know, we have liars up the wazoo. I'm going to raise this, I'm going to increase the economy, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then they don't do a single thing. Hitler, for all of his flaws, did every single thing he said he would do on his list. He was going to punish the Jews, he punished the Jews. He was going to build the economy, he built the economy. He was going to build the greatest army, he built the greatest army. You know, as Norm Macdonald likes to say in his comedy that, you know, the only country he's afraid of is Germany, because twice in a single century they went to battle with the entire world and almost won. You know, that's, you know, I'm not just going to battle with my neighbor or this little thing. No, the entire world. I mean, you can't say this wasn't a big, hairy, audacious goals, to go back to Tom Peters' reference for good leadership. This is a guy, you've got to hand it to his integrity with his skewed idea. Now, you've also got to question whether it's really such a good idea to let sick parents abuse their children, because sick parents raised Adolf Hitler, and not a single person gave a damn. There was not a single person that said no. This is a young, sensitive boy who wants to be an artist, who da-da-da-da-da, and you are not going to shame him. You are not going to terrorize him. You're not going to tell him he's completely inadequate. You're not going to create this thing that he has to be superhuman just to be good enough to get a little attention. You're not going to do that to this little boy, because we're a humanity who cares about children. Forget it. We don't care about children. And we didn't care as a country, as a world. The conquering country in the First World War, if you look at the history, just decimated Germany. There was very little regard for German citizens eating leather. As long as we could get the incredibly high war reparations back from the Germans, this is why the Marshall Plan was such a great idea, we could give a shit that there was a shamed, terrorized, traumatized little boy called Hitler, or called Adolf, you know, who was forming a determination, what, for revenge, for this, that, the other, the things that little traumatized boys form. Only this guy had the drive to carry it out. And see, it wouldn't have cost that many billions to have some sense around the world, an international thing that basically says that any child that's being abused, that anyone reports, this body has billions of dollars to go and resolve their trauma. It wouldn't have cost billions. And this creates a statement of safety, of humanity, etc., that calms down revenge. And it's the opposite of what we're doing today in America, bombing weddings with drones in other people's countries in the name of terrorism. And it is terrorism. You just wait until a drone drops a bomb and blows up your wedding, and you hear from a foreign country that they think there was a terrorist present, and so they blew all of you up. You just wait and see how you feel when Syria, on the news, the new superpower, right, blows up your wedding and says, well, it was a tough call, but we had definite intelligence. And we cannot let the terrorists win. We have to blow up these weddings because, well, who knows what might happen. That terrorist might go out and blow up someone else's wedding. So we had to blow up this wedding to stop that wedding from being blown up. It makes no sense. It's absolute barbaric stupidity. And that's what we run as a civilization. When we let a single child experience the kind of hardship, barbaric treatment that someone like Hitler experienced. But here's another reason why I bring this up. The distinction between the enemy and the talent, the distinction between the strength, the goal, and the value. So I give Hitler 10 out of 10 for integrity. Not with my values, but with what he said he was going to do. Did he say he was going to do all that? Yes, he did. He told everyone, and then he did it. Good for him. If only he had told everyone he was going to create world peace, he had the kind of drive to pull it off. Well, maybe if his father, if his community, if the Aryan good-looking guys around him had been kind to him, if the women, maybe he'd have had another goal with that kind of manic integrity. But he gets a 10 for integrity between what he said he's going to do and what he did, regardless of what I think about what he did. He gets an 8 to 10 in self-discipline. He inspired troops by suffering along with his thing. Something, can you imagine Donald Trump going out in the trenches with some pathetic mission? We're out bombing some poor sod over in another country, of course, in the great name of terror. Can you imagine him getting out in the trenches, working some of his fat off, leading a charge? No. Trump's, isn't going to take an impoverished nation and, conquer the world. Of course not. But Adolf Hitler had some of that self-discipline. He had long-term planning. So he had a number of strengths pretty highly up there. And Hitler, ironically, learned a lot of things. Hitler followed this to a T. Gerber, Hitler, and Himmler all studied things. They learned from Ford. They learned from one of the greatest advertising executives in America. I forget his name right now. They studied what worked. They were practical. Other than wasting their energy trying to attack the entire world, they were incredibly practical in how they went about their impractical goals. So if you distinguish the strengths and the strategy of your enemy from the goals and values of your enemy, you will accelerate your growth. If you despise the strengths and strategy of your enemy, be it your ex-partner, your rival in business, whatever it is, some villain over on the other side. If you despise them to such an extent that you cannot understand or respect the strategies and the strengths that they are using to beat you or combat you or pose a threat, you are more likely to lose. Because it is the person who respects their enemy, understands the strengths, respects the strengths, and values the same strategies and strengths enough to combat, to meet karate with karate, to meet soft power with soft power, to meet idealism about this with idealism about this, to create an effective campaign for values we believe in. Unless you respect that, there is a good chance you lose. This is why you need the distinction between the stereotype of the enemy and the actual enemy, the values of the enemy, and the skills and strengths they use to perpetrate that value. And in this way, our enemy is always our teacher, particularly the enemy that beats us or almost beats us. They are our best teacher, because the enemy that beats us tells us what energy we disrespect. We don't respect and honor the energies of the enemies we lose to as much as they do, particularly in a well-matched campaign. Hitler against the world was not a well-matched campaign. Totalitarian regime has a competency level that is often much higher than democracy. That's, but we're ranting about democracy over what works. Well, if we're too fanatical, one country can take over the entire world if they're an effective dictator. So one should balance, when is dictatorship better than democracy, and when is democracy better than dictatorship? In states of high survival and trauma, this is one of the reasons we give presidents executive powers during states of certain kinds of wars, because we understand that dictatorship is more competent. So so this brings an awareness. Oh, okay, we're really for a safe, happy culture that is growing. And most of the time, whenever possible, we want to be democratic, and then sometimes we want to be autocratic. Try raising a set of children democratically. In this culture, it doesn't work. There has to be a mixture of autocracy and democracy in a family parenting dynamic for it to work. So the other thing we have to distinguish again between is their context and our context, which is namely our culture. In other words, Ford was trying to do what Gates later did with the PC. Ford's dream was not to get rich, was not to sell the most expensive car, was not to sell the nicest built car. Ford's goal was to put a car in every household, just like Gates's goal was a computer in every home. And so that's his goal, and then his context is his time, his technology, etc. But the principles, what he did with an intercom system, I can do with cell phones. It's much easier. So you don't copy the context of your hero and mentor. You copy the bits that relate. You also need to distinguish between the areas of competency and the areas of incompetency of your mentor. For example, if I want to learn about near-death experiences, I don't go to Elon Musk. As far as I know, he's never had one. Not interested in them. So a given hero or heroine or teacher or mentor is going to be competent in a specialized field. And it is critical one of the biggest blunders we see in history is, Thomas Edison says, Albert Einstein says. In other words, Einstein invented an effective theory of relativity, so now he's a good politician? It's like, how does that figure? But Albert Einstein lends his support to X politician. Big deal. It doesn't mean anything. Albert Einstein suggested this theory in the area of his competency. That could mean a great deal. So you want to understand that, including with me. This is just the best that I've come up with. There may be dozens of people who could say this better than me and that have more facts, who've made a lifetime of it. I'm sharing what I know. I've made my lifetime learning about mentors in these ways. I believe it can help you, so I'm sharing it. Does it mean I know the best sexual position for you and your partner? Of course not. Does it mean I know what food you should eat? Of course not. It just means I know what works for me. And I believe that there's a good number of you, based on just the logic of it, that will find it similarly helpful. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next week.